I hope you all can hear me. Good afternoon. Welcome to my session. The session has been a bit, session plan has been a bit changed, so I'm up now. Great. Sooner I can get on with the beers. I want to talk to you with a 1000 Seat VDI in-a-Box implementation. My name is Ctrix from the Netherlands. If you need to find me, I'm below there on Twitter and LinkedIn. What we're going to talk about is a brief introduction of what we're going to do. We're going to discuss one slide about my company, a bit about the project, VDI-in-a-Box, a bit about the implementation. The captain just came in. Yes, Captain.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, good. Or should we start over?
Sorry.
Cut it off.
Just edit that out.
Don't cut it off.
Yeah, okay, so we'll do a VDI-in-a-Box 101, just to bring you up to speed about VDI-in-a-Box for those who don't know it. We're going to talk a lot about the project, what we did, how we did it, why we did it, the implementation. This is the funny one, the best practices, because a lot of things didn't go right the first time. Always. And the verdict, because one of the questions I asked myself is VDI-in-a-Box suitable for large deployments? Brief introduction, we have talked about me, I'm from the Netherlands. I work for the company called Leisure IT, that's this one. We're part of a big organization. They pay the tickets, so they get one slide, that's the deal. I work for the company, we have a really nice office. We have 2 data centers of our own, one here and one on the other side of town. If you need any more info, just Google the companies. Great company to work for. Great. VDI-in-a-Box. All companies, we at Leisure IT are a Ctrix partner, and we mostly do XenApp or Zen desktop deployments. But sometimes there's a VDI-in-a-Box deployment. And I think it's a great product, so I wanted to show you guys what it can do. And to start with that, let's start with how a normal environment works. These are all slides. I took these from the Ctrix site, so you probably know them. In a normal traditional VDI deployment, if it's on-premise, off-premise, or whatever, you get the clients have to connect to some kind of load balancer. It could be preferably NetScaler or something. They get to the connection brokers, the storefront servers. They get to some management servers. We need Active Directory, we need a lot of servers, we need SANs, we need a lot of things. All things need to plug together, need to work together to get everything working. In a VDI-in-a-Box deployment, we don't need all that. Just give me some clients, give me some servers, Active Directory optional, and a place to store my data, and I'm good to go. So that's great. Simple, like simple. Okay, how does it work? VDI-in-a-Box does one thing and it does it good. It says, well, just give me a server, put on a hypervisor, I don't care which one, import my grid server, the VDI manager, deploy it on all the servers, let the VDI manager talk to each other that they know who they are and where are the other servers are. Import VM, deploy it, go. You need to scale up, scale out, add a server, no problem. So it's really simple. So what it is that traditional VDI is a very complex coffee maker. It makes a lot of coffee, different tastes, different sizes, different shapes, great coffee, but a lot of buttons. VDI-in-a-Box, it just makes coffee. There's one thing, it does it really good. No more things, no more tinkering or difficult things to do, it's just simple. That being said, so VDI-in-a-Box is a simple product, easy to comprehend, and hopefully scalable. We come now to the project, which of course has always the same triangle, really cheap. Project, I have a company called Software. The reason I chose fictive company names is that the companies which we did this for wouldn't want to go on slides, on air, on YouTube. They will say, well, it's okay to use the project, but don't use the name. Okay. So we got Dove Beer, and we got Peter Dale from my 2 favorite characters. They need a merger, they need to get to one company. Dove Beer has 800 users, 150 XP workstations. Windows 7, they use Novell. Yes, there are companies that use Novell. They use Novell ZenWorks to deploy the applications to the desktops. They also have a Windows AD environment. You sync it with the DirectML tool. So when a user changes something in his novel environment, the password is saved to Active Directory. VMware vSphere 5.1, they have an EMC SAN solution, and they use Medio for profile management on their existing workstations. Patriot Ale is a bit small, 600 users, 350 concurrent, a bit less, but completely Active Directory based, Windows based. But they use Novell ZenWorks for Windows for application deployment. This company also used Novell way back when, but they kept using Novell ZenWorks because it helps them and they understood the technology to deploy applications to the desktop. So, what a vSphere environment, also a SAN. They use Windows policies for deploying other things and a roaming profile, so no Medio or whatever. So these are the two companies. What were the reasons for merger? IT problems. Users were sick and tired of the things not working, and the most problems were on the side the user Novell. Surprise. Other things were economy of scale. They want to buy in larger, get a shared service center running, and a future merger where the companies should merge to one big company. Okay, that being said, they hired, so they need to plug in the environments, need to create one environment. That being said, they hired an external consultancy firm to say, okay guys, what should we do? Not us. We came in the picture later. This external company said, well, we need one ZenWorks environment for distribution of the applications, one single Active Directory, one printer environment. We need Ctrix VDI in a box. We were like, why? And we thought, well, Yoda must have said it. He's the only one that can say, you need to do it, and then it gets done. Talking with the consultant who wrote this, he was a Ctrix VDI in-a-Box fan, and he said, well, it's a simple product, and the guys that do the IT control now need to manage the new environment, and they come from Novell, they need to exchange all new Active Directory and Windows related things, so let's not make it too complex by also implementing PVS or whatever. Okay, let's do that. You want to have one vSphere environment. Redundant internet feed, so everything should be redundant. Both companies have had their own data center for a while, so we need both data centers to be used. They're there. Replacing XP needs to be moved out. And restricting the Windows 7 workstation, we don't want users to install their own apps anymore. Okay. But when needed, we need to separate it and have the two separate environments again, because, we like them, but we don't know if we like them forever. So we give them a knife to be separated. It should be cost effective, and it should be done yesterday, of course. Okay, well, this project is massive because we need to migrate Exchange, we needed to create a new vSphere environment, blah blah blah. All good, but the focus of this presentation is VDI in a box. So we said, okay, you need to use VDI in a box. Let's do that. Let's start with some good things about VDI in a box. As said in the VDI in a box 101, you just plug in the server, you install the hypervisor, you install the VDI manager, say connect to the existing grid, to the existing servers. Let's go. New server attached. You can build. That means it has a short implementation time because you don't need to make complex VLANs, whatever. It's easy to comprehend, which is great for IT control dudes who need to keep it working. It has Ctrix Universal Profile Manager and all Ctrix policies included. It's a separate download, but you can use it in this environment as it were as a desktop environment. It can be then connected to a store from Netscaler, so that's also great. We have the two-factor authentication, etc. So it has a simple base, but you can add all difficult components like Netscalers. DNS is not required. The grid always works based on IP addresses, so you could use DNS, but you could also use IP addresses if your company for some reason doesn't have DNS. AD is not required. VDI in a box can work as a standalone, then it uses an internal database. The way it deploys the images using a form of machine creation services from Ctrix is it deploys and it puts the user in, and it can use AD, but it can also use an internal database. So you can create users on the grid server, say okay, username, password, deploy it, and then you don't need an AD. Makes management a bit hard, but it can be done. There is a server sizing tool being there. It's an Excel document which you can fill in, and it gives you some data which isn't really good, but something. It's cheaper, the licensing is cheaper, you don't need expensive SANs or whatever, you don't need a lot of license servers or whatever. It's a bit cheaper to buy, and updating of the image, because it's machine creation service, you have a base image, you can say edit, it boots up, you put changes in, you say save, you say deploy, it's deployed, also all the workstations reboot the next morning from the new image. That's an easy process. Are there any cons? Yeah, so this is, well, yeah, there are some cons, yeah. It's not all good. It's Citrix, so it can all be all good. One of the problems is in a bigger environment you have multiple VLANs. When you create a base image in machine creation service or in VDI-in-a-Box, you can only give it one VLAN tag. That's it, and that's for the whole image, that VLAN. And because all the virtual machines are destroyed and recreated, you can't change that. So your VLAN infrastructure should really think about, okay, what we're going to do with, if we have multiple VLANs, how we're going to manage that. There's no app publishing. VDI-in-a-Box publishes a desktop. It's a one-button thing, so we publish a desktop and that's it. It says here supported because we tried, and you can, if you change Explorer with exit in the registry with Notepad with exit, then boost Notepad. But if you get into problems, Citrix will say not supported. It's only licensed per user, not per device or whatever, so every user that logs on needs to have a license. All the users need to be in the same domain. The computer images can be in separate domains, so you could have a resource domain with several domains beneath that, and the computers can be in different domains, but all the users need to be in the same domain for that to work. One of the neat features of Zen Desktop is you can say, well, okay, I want every morning at 7 o'clock I want to have 100 VMs idling, running, standing by for the users to log on, and if they fill up because the users log on, reboot another one, reboot it. Give me some room, but in the evening I want only 5 VMs idling because I can save money by shutting down unused servers. That doesn't work. Rebooting image can only you can only say, well, I want to, yeah, well, you probably can't read that, but it says here I want to have 20 desktops set idle at all time, and that's 24/7. And I have a reboot schedule every day at 3 AM, reboot everything. And then there are 20 idle desktops, but if in the morning everyone logs on at 8 o'clock, as a good factory worker does, oh, all 20 full, deploy another one, so that could pose issues. Grid server needs connection with hosts and VMs, because the grid server is the thing that does all talk with the environment. It needs to connect to the hypervisor to create the VMs, and it needs to connect to VM for Active Directory activation and implementation, that sort of things. So that could pose a security issue if that's because if the grid needs to connect to the VMs and the hosts, the users who are in the VMs can also connect to the grid and the hosts, because the grid server only has one NIC. So you have to work around that, perhaps with VLANs and firewalling on the gateways, etc. But it could be an issue. Well, in this case, we just said, well, okay, we create a separate VLAN. We just put in the VMware hosts that the company has for this VDI-in-a-Box solution. We create a separate VLAN for the clients, and we route between for 2 VLANs. And the backend VMware environment is in a different VLAN where the users cannot connect directly to. So the vSphere hosts for the backend are not editable by the users. They can be avoided. Another problem is when you create a new image, you say, okay, well, let's deploy the image to all the grid servers. It says it does just that. Being that you have 2 data centers, could pose an issue if you have a small one link. Because if you create new images, you say deploy to all servers in the grid, it deploys them to every hypervisor where in the world it is. And if you have, for example, 100 Mbit link between data center 1 and 2, it's going to push 20, 30 gigs over the line to the other side. was an issue. So that's a problem. Limited monitoring. Yeah, well, it does not do much with monitoring. Zen Desktop has the great edge side feature embedded in the Zen Desktop 7.5. It doesn't have that. You can log on to the user and you can log on to the interface. You can see basic things, but nothing too exciting. Load balancing. Internal web interface is restricted, meaning that when you log on storefront, you can do features like scale the screen size, for example. The web interface, which is also located on the grid server, just gives you a logon, username, password, launch, and that's that. It doesn't do any more. But we implement a storefront service, so we can have a little bit more flexibility. Load balancing is done by the grid appliance, so every Hyper-V host has a grid server and he looks at his own host to see how busy he is. But the only thing you get from that is these kinds of graphics saying, okay, well, server is 30% used, great. And the load balancing between that is done by total used available memory and processor on each server. So nothing fancy with load balancing as we had in the last session with Microsoft and Zen app. It's just basic connect and go, fire and forget. Saying that image editing is easy, it's great, but image versioning sucks, because if you want to go roll back to an image, yeah, if you have one image you edit it and you cock it up, you can't go back. So what you need to do is you have a base image. Every time you change something, you need to make a copy. What you then does is copy the template, edit the template, then distribute it. So that leaves you with a good talk with your IT guys about how to version the images, because yeah, if they change the production version to something that doesn't work, you need to go back, because everything is local. There's no backups somewhere. So if you make a problem with the production VM, you end up with a huge problem. And another problem is you can't resize a disk once you create an image. So once the image is created and it's 50 gigs, you need to have 5 gigs or 10 gigs for extra Windows updates. That's the problem. Same shot here, you have the different version at the end. If you download the presentation later, you can see what versioning does. Okay, then we said, okay, all the pros and cons weighed. Let's see how we're going to do this. Design decisions. We're going to use all local storage. So all Hyper-V hosts or all the vSphere hosts in the new environment get local storage. We create everything on local storage, except for profiles, because once the grid server dies, you're not going to lose everything. We're going to try and use only pooled Windows 7 VMs. Because we used Novell Zenberg for deployment of applications, you could create a base image which would be the same for the two companies, and with the rights in Novell you could deliver the applications to the users when needed. And only pooled desktops mean after reboot, all clean. So we had to make very sure that the things that we put in the base image were the things that cost a lot of time and bandwidth to install. So we use the same entity for both desktops. Same desktop for both entities. We ended up with a 10 gig link between the sites, which was great, so bandwidth not an issue. We could provision VMs or copy templates during the production, no problems. There was one problem with a typo I see. The grid VDI-in-a-Box talks to the hypervisor. Great thing is you could use the free version of Hyper-V or Zen server, and the grid server would talk just to the hypervisor. You don't need management. VDI-in-a-Box does all the management. But on the free version of vSphere, the API required for machine creation, for creating the new VMs, is closed. So you need to buy the cheapest available license for vSphere to roll out new machines. Being that the guy who wrote the external consultant wrote, it needs to be vSphere, okay, needs to buy extra license, okay. Let's do that. We want to use Immediate for profile management on both locations. So everything would be done with Immediate. And Immediate is just, sorry, you're wrong.
Wrong room, sorry.
No, Immediate is just, they used it, they had profile problems, they implemented Immediate on one side to fix those problems, and it was working, so they said, well, we know how it works, we get a lot of new stuff, let's keep some things as they are. Great. Then with Windows for application delivery, so that's also one thing that stayed the same. The only problem is we had to convert for one of the sites all the applications from Novell to the Windows version of application delivery by ZenWorks. That was a bit of an issue, okay. And we said, well, we need both data centers active for VDI because it's all local storage. There is no intelligence for failover or whatever. So if we put all the boxes in one side and the site goes down, we have no VDI in a box in the other side. So both data centers active, and with 10 gigs, no problem. That being said, the problem which you have is that when the users connect to the grid, they connect to one of the servers and they point it to a VM that's available. And it could be that in data center 1, but this neighbor could be set to a data center 2. So it had to be a low latency line, and thankfully it was. Okay, then we came to the point, okay, we made the design decisions, how are we going to size this baby? VDI-in-a-Box has a great server sizing calculator. It says, okay, give me the number of users. I said task workers are simple users that only use a bit of Office and small things. Knowledge workers are users that use a bit more engineering type of skills. Alright, so we filled in 200 and 800 users, we came to 1,000, that's great. Said, okay, you have an image. Well, we said we're going to start with one pool image, 50 gigs, so let's do that. Then my Excel 2013 didn't understand the macro made in 2003 or 2007 Excel, but so things were a bit wrong. But you can choose your hypervisor here. You can choose how many data stores you have. This one is local storage, so only one hypervisor, one data store. Select the disks you have, and it says, well, you need at least 11 servers for 1,000 desktops, which minimum of 14 cores per server, not including hyperthreading. Okay? You need to have at least 220 gigs of RAM per server. Then you're going to need at least 1,200 IOPS, at least. And it says here you need at least 20 disks to create the IOPS to do this. It even says, well, if a user uses this much bandwidth, you need have at least this much bandwidth for the network card on the hypervisor, so on a physical box. Okay, great. It also has a reverse engineering calculator saying, okay, I've got 10 hosts in store with these specs. You can fill in the specs here. You can see how many VMs you can host on them, and you can size them backwards. So if you have any hardware in stock, could be old, could be new, you can also reverse engineer how much VMs you're going to need. How does it do that? It works with about. It says here, well, you can have 10 desktops per core, perhaps, and it says desktops should definitely work if you use hyperthreading, and you don't. Hyperthreading is enabled, and you don't count the hyperthreading core as a core. So that being said, you can push between 6 and 12 VMs on a per core. Now, RAM requirements, it says, well, you could, these are the requirements. They are a bit tight, as we found out when we started working in production. But okay, well, at least you got a thing to go on. That being said, how did we put it on? We got a back-end environment, we got a front-end environment, back-end, front-end there, sounds that replicate. We got a multi-host IP WAN infrastructure. Zooming in on the VDI-in-a-Box, we had two LANs. We had in the DAF data center we had VLAN 200. We also had VLAN 300 in the AIL data center, and VLAN 201 and 201 on both sides. So what happens is we bolted in the VDI-in-a-Box servers in the server LAN, where all the grid appliances also run. We had a separate VLAN for all the VMs. 10 gigs in between. We had a NetScaler on both sides. So if one site would go down, we would lose half of our VDI-in-a-Box capacity, but we would still have half of the capacity, more or less. We ended up with 13 servers, physical hosts, to to get this all up and running. And 7 on one, 6 on the other. So that was, it's not a big of a one of the requirements was we need a high availability data recovery thing. So we said, well, okay, we can do this, or we can scale out that we have 13 here and 13 there. They said, well, that's a bit expensive, so let's not do that. So it was 7/6, okay, great. Then it came to migration time. We migrated the users to, they both had ADs, so we migrated all the users to the new domain with the Active Directory migration tool. We used Immediate when possible, if possible, for migration of profiles, so the favorites, etc. were reserved for the users. Through ZenWorks, we deployed the URL to Ctrix VDI and the client, so the users would receive an email saying, okay, tomorrow you need to click this URL which is posted on your desktop and you can log on. Then we started using GPOs to restrict the workstation some more, and all the XPages workstations were replaced with Windows thin clients because we couldn't use flash redirection. That being said, the VDI-in-a-Box offers a limited stack of HDX capabilities. It does most of HDX, but not the hardware rendering stuff. So you can NVIDIA Grid, etc. That doesn't work, but most of the standard things you want to do, redirection of flash, redirection of EMV, that sort of stuff that works great with VDI-in-a-Box. So that being said, woohoo, beer time. That was great. So the implementation, migration worked. We ran into small issues with the user not understanding or whatever. The workstations that were not really in the domain, that were in the domain, or not talking to ZenWorks, or all small things. But in general, we had a new environment. Users logged on, profiles were migrated. On one side, the other side came with new profiles, and they were working. And then, lessons learned. Not everything went well first time, and some things are good to know. Because VDI-in-a-Box refreshes all the desktops at 3 AM in the morning, so it destroys all the old VMs and creates new ones. You could end up with 2 DNS entries for the same name or something like that, some stale DNS problems. So we said, well, let's keep the DHCP and DNS release times as low as possible to minimize those kinds of problems. The grid server, the grid appliance in VDI-in-a-Box is a Linux box. You can SSH into it. That's great. But the first thing he says, well, do not modify any files or directories or it could go bust. Okay, great, thanks. One of the things we thought, well, we are smart, is you could log in here and change the time zone. What it then does is say, okay, we have time zone Amsterdam, great, GMT +1. We did that on all the boxes, so all the boxes had the same time zone. But then one of the VMware hosts went bust. They installed a new server, imported the grid appliance, connected it to the grid. But then all the servers were in one time zone, and one of the grid servers was in another time zone because they forgot to change the time zone. That's also not really a problem, except when you install something like, at the end of the day, destroy the VMs at 3 AM and reboot them. All the users would do that at 3 AM Amsterdam time, and one would do it at 5 PM Amsterdam time. Oops. What happened? Well, that's something, there's some other things, so if you don't need to get into the console, please go. Now the LDAP account that's in the VDI-in-a-Box server for creating and destroying the computer accounts, you need to have at least the right to add unlimited computer accounts, because when you destroy and redeploy VMs, that's something that the service account has to register. Refresh desktops on a regular basis. We had one customer where we said you can, when you create a VDI image, you can say, well, I want a desktop refreshed on log off, so whenever a user logs off, the VM is destroyed, the new VM is deployed from the same image. You can say, well, do it once a week, or nah, don't do it. If you don't do it, we had one VM, Windows 7, which was up for 100 days, and then the user complained, well, log on is really slow. Okay, yeah, I can understand why. So this is something you can tick, it's a box you can tick, refresh the desktops on a regular basis. Don't forget. And of course the sizing tool is a guideline, because once one task worker is not the other task worker. So some of the, we need to ended up with multiple images because some users didn't have enough with the 1.5 gigs they were provided with, or with one core. Other best practices. The delete computer account does not always work. So once you get VDI-in-a-Box to refresh all the computers, it deletes all the computer accounts and puts in the new. But that doesn't always work. So when you look in the computer account in the old computer overview, okay, 2,000 computers, that's not good. So you should check once in a while if there are any stale computer account records. When you re-add the host to the cluster, when you have a VDI, you have a vSphere cluster, you implement the VDI-in-a-Box, the grid server on it. Once it goes bust for some reason, please just reinstall, including the hypervisor, so you don't have any residual installation from the first installation. We had a problem where once we re-added a server from which the grid server crashed, the host was still alive. We imported a new grid server, joined it to the grid, and some of the settings were gone. So I think it's a bug of some kind. We said, okay, let's try that again, and then format the host, import a new grid server, different name, different IP for the host, import the grid server, and then all settings were kept. So I think there was some kind of bug, but just to be safe, when re-adding a VMware host to the cluster with the grid server on it, just reinstall just to be safe. And this was something that the local IT guys came up with. Once you create a VDI-in-a-Box deployment, you give them OU where to store the computer accounts. They didn't like that name that we gave it, so they changed the name. What then happens is once VDI-in-a-Box starts refreshing the desktops, he wants to put the computer accounts in OU, but OU doesn't exist, so he destroys the computer, builds a new one, tries again. So what you can see is when we came to the site the next morning, all the Hyper-V of vSphere hosts were very busy, but there were no desktops created. So once we recreated that folder, that OU, poof, we were up and running again. So don't change the OU. Yeah, this is these were some settings. The external HDX gateway, some settings of that were removed once we added the host. Another pain in the butt is always licensing. When you deploy VDI-in-a-Box, you need desktop VDA licenses for Microsoft. VDI-in-a-Box also says, well, you don't need to use the HDX stack if you want to connect remotely. You could also use RDP. But if you do, you need to get an additional RDS license per VM for the desktop OS. Okay. When connecting to the internal site, it's not required to buy RDS licenses. So that's a bit wobbly. We consulted with with Microsoft and other parties, but this is what they came out. And when you connect to VCA through the Netscaler, no RDS licensing is required. And I had some Netscaler happiness importing with here. I imported the Netscaler, gave it through the console IP address, but when I rebooted it, I kept losing half the pings. It was going mental. I ditched the VM, imported a new Netscaler, got the same problem. This issue occurred because the customer had a lot of multicast traffic on his LAN. And when a Netscaler has no license, it has a throughput of 1 megabit. And if you have a lot of multicast traffic, this was 0.98 megabit. So once you ping it, it gets above the 1 Mbit and then it loses it. So that took me about half a day to figure out. But we got that fixed. So and the customer needs to look at his LAN, what happens there. There's something not completely correct. Some other cool stuff. In the new, we said we were going to use all local storage. In the previous session we added about the personal vDisks. VDI-in-a-Box also does personal vDisks. You can set the data store. If you want, you can set local data store, but you can also use SAN storage for desktops or your personal vDisk. Be very wise if you want to use personal vDisk, put those on the SAN. Some other things, if you You could also say, well, okay, I have one template to deploy all my VMs from. I could also put that one on shared storage and say to all the servers, well, get that image. So that would also help with a lot of traffic going through all the grid servers, reducing. And what I said is you can also connect through RDP gateway if you don't want to, if the customer doesn't want to buy a Netscaler or whatever. There was one cool stuff that I found, one cool thing that I found out with the client, with the customers, which uses the internal grid server web interface. Once you log on there with username and password, it comes with, okay, you can start this VDA. This is one created for you. If you click on the problems connecting button, it says, well, you can connect, okay, well, connect with RDP, let's try that out. Or restart this desktop, so that the user can do a bit of self-service by restarting his own VM. That being said, is VDI-in-a-Box scalable for larger environments? Hell yeah, it can scale. But it depends on architecture, not scaling. You have a lot of things, all the cons you have to think about, are they important in my environment? In this environment they were not really an issue, so we scaled here and we could scale on if needed. And I read some Ctrix articles saying that it could scale multiple thousands of desktops, and Zen desktop would be beneficiary if you get above 10,000 desktops. That also being said, is it scalable for a larger environment? Yes, because in the latest version you can also deploy Windows 2012 R2 as a single instance. So if you're a service provider, you could use 2012 R2 as a single instance. You use VDI-in-a-Box to deploy as it were a Windows 8 VM.
Thus you don't need a VDI license.
That being said, I love the product, it's great, it's simple, it's easy to use. But I looked at the Synergy catalog, I couldn't be there, I was very sorry, but couldn't be there. But I looked for VDI-in-a-Box, no sessions. So there's nothing mentioned in Synergy about VDI-in-a-Box. And one of the features that's newly introduced in 5.4, migrate to Ctrix Studio. Okay, so you can migrate from VDI-in-a-Box to Zen Desktop, one way or the other, without having to redeploy all the images or redo all your work. So that makes me wonder what Ctrix is going to do with it. It's still under deployment, and you can see that version 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4 have really made some steps improvements, new features, supporting Windows 8.1, etc. But it still makes me wonder what Ctrix is going to do with VDI-in-a-Box. So, you want my opinion? It's a simple product, it rocks, and you should all try. Any questions? Okay, then if there are no questions, grab a cup of coffee and thanks for your attention.